What's up, guys? Josh Lau here with the Card Guys, and today I'm going to be bringing you guys my CYB Triple Route Jubil Dawnblade World's Deck Tech. Now, I am recording this on November 11th after the BNR, so I'm going to be talking about the deck list, and then I'm also going to be showing you guys an updated deck list. Obviously, since Blue CYB is no longer legal, and High Octane is no longer legal. So with those changes, the deck is about 8 cards different, so we're going to go through that. I'm also going to show you guys how to sideboard with this deck because I think this deck is a little bit complicated to play. So we're going to go through all that. But the reason you would be playing a deck like this is if you want to target Rune Blades as Dorinthea, I think this is one of the best ways to do so. Jubil is one of the strongest weapons against them, and Count Your Blessings, even though we lost the blue, is still very, very effective against split damage. Now, this deck does retain all the necessary tools to be aggressive with Dawnblade. It has Supremacy, it has Warrior's Valor, it has Blade Flurry, it has Singing Steelblade. So this is a deck list that has the ability to switch into an aggressive, a mid-range, or a long-term style. It has sideboard plans for everything. So yeah, let's just get into it. If you guys want the full deck list with all the Fabry sideboard, all the sideboard buttons, sideboard notes, and stuff like that, that will be available on the TheCardGuyz Patreon. But the full list, as well as several sample sideboards, will be provided in this video. So if you guys want to check any of that out, it'll be in the video description. All right, let's jump into the main board of the deck, and then we'll talk about the sideboard, and I'll tell you about how to, adjust the deck for the BNR, as well as how to sideboard for some of the matchups. All right, let's jump into it. This is the deck that I took to Osaka. Obviously, there was a BNR today. I'm recording this on Monday, November 11th. So I'm going to briefly show you my deck, and then I'm going to, because frankly this is old news, I'm going to show you my updated list. I'm also going to run through how to do sideboarding with this deck, because this is a deck that is extremely complicated to sideboard, because you have to know, you basically have to practice every single matchup to understand how you need to play each matchup. So we're going to be running through that. But first, we have the 50 card main deck that I took to Worlds. So just looking at it without looking at the sideboard or the weapon choices, this looks kind of standard. Obviously, there's a couple stylistic choices that are a little bit odd, like extra copies of Route, running Chorus in the main board, only one Twinning Blade, no Glistening Steel Blade, no Ironsong Determination. The puncture count is very low. Yeah, no lead for speeds and such like that. And you'll kind of see why that is the case once we look at the sideboard. But let me briefly run through a lot of the cards. So the core of this deck is there to support a Dawnblade, or, well, there is Jubil in the sideboard, but to support a aggressive Dawnblade Dory, or to support a Jubil Dory that can end the game in a reasonable amount of time. And there are also many concessions made to deal with Enigma as well. So when we go through all the cards, try to keep that in mind, that is the reason for a lot of these choices, right? Okay, so let's start off with the attack reaction suite, because I think that's actually the thing that is a little bit different than normal. So we're playing 3 copies of Blade Flurry. This is a staple for all the warriors, basically. Even Bolton sometimes runs this card. Just supports racing. It's our 0 for 4. And, it just pushes over by a bit, but against a lot of decks of the format, pushing over by a little bit is just enough. Doesn't require reprise as well, which is very useful. Got 2 copies of Ironsong Response. There is no 3rd copy in the World's deck list that I took, mainly because we're not racing that many decks in the format. So having 3 copies is not really necessary. Although obviously it synergizes excellently with all the Warriors Valors we're playing. We're playing 8 of them. We got 1 copy of Puncture. This is just solely to tutor with Singing Steelblade. We're not really relying on 1 cost attack reacts in this deck. We're basically trying to squeak out value with our 0 costs, or we're trying to extend the game by playing CYB plus swinging our weapon. So that's why we only have 1 copy of that. If we look at our heavy attack reacts, your eyes do not deceive you. That is 3 copies of Red Overpower and 3 copies of Rout. So from my testing, I found that the best way to deal with Enigma is to combine Chorus with a large attack react. Chorus in my initial testing was not cutting it because I was relying on things like Blade Flurry, Ironsong Response, Puncture, Out for Blood, Stroke of Foresight to get the job done, and that just gets massively blown out by any 0-for-4D react. Obviously, Enigma is running Sync and Fate. They could be also running, That's All You Got, Hold the Line, Unmovable is not uncommon either. So having access to these large attack reacts helps you quite a bit in that matchup. Also, I found this out at one of my PQs that, this actually helps a lot against Guardian as well. Because if you think about playing out Rout, that's 18 guaranteed damage against a Guardian in general. So like, let's say you hold a blue and you swing your weapon, they block 3 on 3, you route their defending card back to their hand, that's 6 damage. Warrior often had a hard time dealing with Guardian because they just didn't have enough damage output. And 3 route really do help that a lot. And returning a card that they wanted to block with anyways doesn't change anything. They often can't even use that card. So route really good against Guardians. And very good against Enigma as well. So yeah, that's why we're running the full package of heavy attack reacts. Also, because we are a Tunic deck, we also have Grains, but there'll be late game situations where we basically could take a mini Storm Strider's turn and kill them with Overpower or Rout at the end of the game. Suddenly adding 6 damage. Is very good. Okay, so that covers, the traditional red attack reacts. In terms of our yellows, we have 3 copies, of course, of Ironsong. This is a card that is a concession to Enigma. It really doesn't see any other use. Sometimes you can catch people with an Oasis, but generally this is just used for the damage cannot be prevented effect. This will probably be replaced with a Jagged Edge once the Hunted comes out. Once in a while, the Unity blocking text did come up because if you defend with 2 cards, then you can get a Courage token, and that when you swing Jubil, it's more likely to hit. We also have 3 copies of Singing Steelblade. It's a great card. A lot of you're blocking with this card a lot, but in the racing matchups, when we get to endgame, this card is very valuable because it could search up Twinning Blade, it can search up any attack react that you need, it can also search for a Puncture. It's obviously could search for a Glint as well. Lots of applications for that. This deck is only running 1 Twinning Blade. This is actually a card I think at Worlds I did not play a single time. There's no unconditional go again in this deck except for Unsheathed, Hit and Run, Precision Press, and like that's not really a lot. But it's nice to have one of them in there. Sometimes you can use this against Enigma just to attack again when you have Chorus active because Chorus lasts the whole turn. But other than that, yeah, this card is it wasn't really seeing the best usage. This is but that's, basically the more Warriors Valors you see, the less Twinning Blade is going to perform. Okay, so that is our yellow attack reacts. In terms of our red attack reacts, we got 2 copies of Overpower. Wish I could have a third, but you know, it doesn't really come up because we have the red. If we get to that turn 13, 14, 15 before we hit second cycle, we might hit a red Overpower, and then it's you know, kind of takes the place of that third blue Overpower. Got 3 copies of Glint. Obviously, we're playing Glint in this deck. Generally, we are I mean, we're really not attacking that often, so Glint is generally going to be on blocking duty, or it's not even going to get reprise. But sometimes our opponents like to set up, and we can get him with Glint. We got 1 copy of blue Ironsong Response as well, just an extra tutor that costs 0 for seeing Steel Blade in those extreme circumstances. Okay, so that's all the attack reacts. Let's go to the non-attack actions. So 3 copies of Steel Blade Supremacy. Obviously, this is very, very good. When we have our bolters up and we see a good opportunity, this is the turn that we're most likely to use it on because the Steel Blade Supremacy carries for the whole turn. 3 copies of Unsheathed. In most matchups, this is just blocking, or this is just sharpened steel. But in the racing matchups, this is quite nice because it unlocks 1 extra resource that we could carry over with grains, or that we can spend on things like chorus or singing or puncture. And obviously we have 3 copies of Red Warrior's Valor, 2 copies of yellow, and 3 copies of the blue. This effect is just one that we really, really need to race decks and to put pressure on decks that want to set up. And yeah, a lot of decks do not handle, you know, the red especially well because they have a lot of 2 blocks or no blocks. So it's very, very powerful if you can play that out. In terms of yellows, we already talked about that. So in terms of the blues, we have 1 copy of Emboldened Blade. This is a card that I think, spoiler alert, we're going to be playing more of this in the updated post 11/11 ban. This card is very, very, very solid because if you're very, very experienced playing Dorinthea, you can predict with a high certainty whether or not they have a D-react based on how their blocking pattern, their attacking pattern. It makes a lot of it is once you become more and more experienced, the hit rate on this card you know, goes up and up and up. You only really need to hit on this card about 50 to 60% of the time for it to be worth it. And having multiple copies of Emboldened Blade will absolutely terrify the opponent of trying to set up. So this card kind of indirectly is Ironsong Determination, if you think about it, because a lot of decks, how they want to defend against Dorinthea is they want to set up a D-reacted arsenal and try to deny reprise with armor plus a D-react from arsenal. And if you blow up their D-reacted arsenal, obviously, then you're way, 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 way more likely to get reprise. We got 2 copies of Steelblade Shunt. This card, I think, was a mistake in the deck list. The reason I put Steelblade Shunt in was just to up my D-react count a little bit. And to, you know, maybe pick off a Mira guy or something like that with Shunt. However, if the Enigma player has half a brain, they're going to activate their, I forgot the name of it, their leg piece to give themselves ward, and then this is never going to connect with the Mira guy. So this card I did change in my updated list to 2 Emboldened Blades, 2 extra Emboldened Blades. All right, coming down the list here, we got Hit and Run and Precision Press. This just ups our go again count, helps in racing matchups, helps us, you know, speed up our clock as well against setup decks. And we got 3 copies of Warmonger's Diplomacy. This was basically played to mess with Dio. I still think this is probably good enough to include. However, this is a flex slot that you could switch for some other blues if you want to. You could add another Overpower. You could add another Response. You could add in, you know, whatever blue that you really, really like. But I think right for now, I'm just going to keep the Warmongers. So yeah. Okay, so that is the main 50 card main deck. Let's take a look at the sideboard and equipment. and then I'll go through how to sideboard this deck. All right, let's get into that right now. All right, guys, let's take a look at the sideboard and equipment suite. So the first thing I want to talk about is the equipment, and then we'll talk about the sideboard. So in terms of weapons, I included Dawnblade as well as Jubil. Jubil is, I think, an underrated card, especially considering that it pairs very nicely with CYB, because 1 + 2 = 3. Jubil is a card that is extremely annoying for Runeblades to deal with, because their best turns often involve a 5-card hand, so they don't even want to give you a single card for the Jubil. And if Jubil connects several times during the game, that is basically gaining you life, which is helping to fatigue them, which is my primary strategy against Runeblades with this deck list, is basically to run them out of threats. And normally they don't actually run out of cards. They run out of threats, and then, you know, we've gone through the deck. I know if they have D-Reacts or not, or I know the position of their D-Reacts. And things like Warrior's Valor, Jubil, Swing kills them actually very, very, very quickly. So, yes, it is fatigue, but we are not trying... None of my games ended with them not having cards. My games ended with them dying to the mighty Jubil. So, yeah, against Runeblades, we're playing Jubil. Except Vincent, I run Dawnblade, mainly because she can set up, so you actually have to kill her pretty quickly. So Dawnblade is the primary weapon for the deck. As you saw with the main board, we actually have all the pieces to support Dawnblade. The only thing that I want that you may need to watch out for is that Chorus of Ironsong cannot target Jubil, because Chorus of Ironsong says target Dawnblade. But other than that, everything works with both weapons. Obviously, Unsheathed works a little bit worse with Jubil because you can't accrue counters. But other than that, they're both very, very good weapons. And the reason we're playing them is because they are a 1-cost 3 value. And when you pair that with CYB, that is just ridiculous turn after turn value. So those are the weapons. In terms of our head slot, we only have Crown of Providence, and we have Null Rune Hood. We bring Null Rune Hood against the Runeblades and the Wizards. Crown of Providence is the primary card of choice nowadays. This allows us a little bit better blocking on burst turns, and this allows us to arsenal anything with Steelblade Supremacy. This also lets us get away from Command and Conquer when we really want to just keep our whole hand. So several different ways to play this. This card is also very, very good against Enigma's Disruption, because this can kind of allow you to keep a 5-card hand. Often they like to drop a Mirror Guide and CNC you. So this is one of the best tools against that. I would not use this just to filter for offense in general. I would use this the longer that this stays on the board, the better, because it creates more flexibility with your arsenaling, and it creates more... it disincentivizes your opponent from playing disruptive things like CNC, Leave No Witnesses, and stuff like that. So that's the helmet slot. For our chest piece, we have Grains of Bloodspill and Fendel's Spring Tunic. We are running Tunic in a majority of the matchups because swinging our weapon off of Tunic is really, really good value. Also, we have a decent amount of yellows, so this Tunic can kind of turn a yellow into a blue. We have very, very good consistency. Also, pitching a blue and using Tunic allows you to cast 2 CYBs on the same turn, and then come over to your turn and get a third of the value back with the first Tunic counter. So that's yeah, that's primarily how you use that. Grains is played when we need extra armor and when we're, you know, racing. So originally this used to be Courage of Bladehold, but after I thought about it a little bit more, Grains just made a little bit more sense, because I felt like Courage was very all in, and Grains allows you to be a little bit more flexible in how you approach things. In terms of arm pieces, we have Braveforge Bracers and Vambrace. Spoiler alert, the new list would actually include Ironsong Versus. This is one of the high priority equipment pickups for the list. But in this world's deck list, I just did not have room for it. So Brave Forge Bracer is used against every deck, basically. Vambrace is used against Enigma. Yeah, having Vambrace on the board is kind of annoying for Enigma. They have to constantly play around the fact that you can add one at any time. So kind of changes how they have to play. So good card. In terms of our boots, we only have one choice, and that is Refraction Bolters. This card, like I said before, you try to pair this with Steelblade Supremacy, but this is also can work like a Achilles Accelerator. You know, get them low and then suddenly break this, force them to give you a card, something like that. But yeah, that's Refraction Bolters. There's not much to say for it. All right, let's talk about the sideboard. I guess the first thing we should talk about is the 9 CYB. This is the core plan of the deck for a lot of the matchups. Obviously, the blues have been banned. However, I still think that CYB red and yellow still make enough sense with the weapons and the game plan that we're trying to achieve that I would still run the red and the yellows. Obviously, you lose quite a bit of value because you're not getting, 1+6, 1+7, 1+8 at the end of the game. But I think that's fine. The margins of victory against the Rune Blades was not particularly close, especially if the opponent did not know what was coming and they were on Aurora or Viscera, they would lose, basically. I don't want to sugarcoat it, but it was very, very, very hard for them to even have a chance. Now, if they knew that I was playing CYB and they did not have tech cards, they would still lose. They would fat deck, and it would take a little bit longer, but they would still lose. The only way that Rune Blades were beating my deck was they knew I was on CYB, and they had hate cards, and they lined up. Then it was a game. Then it was a 50-50 game. But I think actually with the banning of blue CYB, it actually makes the deck... It doesn't make it better, but I don't think it makes it much worse because people take out their tech cards. Obviously, knowing that you're on CYB is a big advantage, and this is something that I had to deal with, is that, after the first couple of rounds, people knew, hey, they were like, Josh Lau's on CYB Dory. So that is something that you'd have to deal with, especially at a smaller event. It's going to be very difficult to hide the fact that you're on CYB, but I think that's fine because, like I said, I think people are going to take out their tech cards for it, and that actually just makes it better. But anyways, CYB costs 2. That is the main reason that you would be playing these 1-cost weapons. The origin of this deck was actually I was playing Olympia, not Dory, and I was beating Viscerize with Jubil CYB Olympia, and I was like, hold on, there might be something here, and that's kind of the origin of the deck. But yeah, there's a ton of value pairing this with Jubil or Dawnblade because they don't know, is it going to be a puncture or a route, or is this going to be a CYB? They don't know. So yeah, powerful card. It's basically, in certain matchups, it operates like Arcane Barrier, but it's much more effective, which is nice. All right, we got 3 copies of Chains of Eminence. This was for Dio. Now that they've lost High Octane, I don't think you need this card anymore. This card was basically only naming High Octane. If they were out of High Octanes, maybe this was naming Zipper Hit or 0 to 60. Occasionally against Verdance, I would run one of these, and then, just in case we went to second cycle, you could name you know, their combo and stop those shenanigans. But yeah, this is I guess you could also play this against Kano named Wildfire as well. Is an okay use of this card. But basically this was mainly used against Dio, naming High Octane. This card I would replace with some extra attack reacts and the Ironsong versus that I was talking about. Right. Then in the middle here, we just have extra defensive cards. Sink Below, Fate Foreseen, that's all you got. They're effective against Aurora because she comes with the breakpoints. Effective against Dio because of things like, I think it's Outpace, the one that you can't defend with your equipment. That's all you got. It's very, very effective against those 2-cost weapons that they're likely to swing. And just having, you know, Sync Fate, and that's all you got, helps you a little bit against, you know, incidental things like New, Victor, in the mirror if you play against the mirror. So yeah, that's the sideboard there. All right, let's talk a little bit about the changes that I would make to the deck now that we have the November 11th BNR, where they banned High Octane and they banned blue Count Your Blessings. So I'm going to talk about how I'd adjust the deck as well. Obviously, most of the deck is going to stay the same. So the last, 20 minutes have not been in vain, guys. I would not waste your time like that. All right, so let's take a look at the 8 or so cards that I would switch. And then I'm going to talk about how to do some sideboarding with the deck, because I think that is extremely important, because the deck is kind of complicated in terms of its game plan, because it's got a unique game plan against everything. All right, let's talk about that right now. All right, guys, here are the 8 cards that I would switch out, given that Blue CYB got banned and that High Octane got banned, and just based on the performance of this card at Worlds and in testing. So let's go through the cards that I remove. Chains of Eminence, I feel like that's not necessary anymore. If you're really afraid of Verdant's combo, you can keep 1 in, but I really don't think you need this card anymore. Blue CYB, you literally cannot play that anymore, so that is gone. And the 2 blue Steelblade Shunts, this is a card that is good against people that are bad, but not very good against people that are good. So you can keep 1 in there if you want, but I frankly just... I got better things to use my 2 to go on than blue Steelblade Shunt. So that's why I'm removing these 8 cards. We're going to be adding a couple cards. Let's start off with Ironsong Versus, because this is an equipment piece that I think is actually pretty solid. Basically, for decks that you're not going to be swinging very, very often, but when you do swing, you want to be as annoying as possible. This is a good card for that. Now, when you do swing Jubil, in general, this is going to be played with Jubil, but there's some matchups where I think that Dawnblade would also be okay with this. You're basically signaling that you don't have a CYB in hand, but it is what it is. Basically, this is a little bit extra way to squeak out value. And it also has a little bit of synergy with the extra attack reacts we're going to add, because it basically adds 1 value to these attack reacts. And yeah, sometimes you swing with the yellow and you weren't going to play CYB anyways. So swinging Jubil with 2 on hits is really, really, really solid. Also, it enables the other attacks to hit later in the game. If you have a courage token, you can often snowball that into several courage tokens. Right, so that's Ironsong Versus. Adding 3 copies of Snag, I did not respect New enough, and I got punished at Worlds for that. Yeah, basically, there were too many no blocks that I could not present 60 blocking cards against Dio. That's why I didn't include Snag. This is basically, should I play Snag or play Chains? And I chose to play Chains. And, I ran into 3 Dios and I ran into 2 News at Worlds. And, Snag would have been really, really, really huge against them. So adding these back in Obviously, this is also good against decks that want to pummel you. So there's that. Also good against Browse the Ancients. So that's that. 2 copies of Emboldened Blade. This just allows you to be a little bit more aggressive. We needed a blue blocking card to replace Steelblade Shunt, and so this is the best replacement in my opinion. If you get good at reading your opponent, the hit rate on this should be, pretty decent. So yeah, this is a good card. So now we're currently playing 3 copies of that. In terms of our other 2 cards here, I added an Out for Blood and a 3rd Ironsong response. So having an extra Ironsong response just synergizes well with the Warrior's Valor. And I think this is one of the better cards that we can add. Out for Blood, just an extra tutor target for Singing Steelblade. And if they see Puncture and Out for Blood, that makes them have to think about both cards, even though we're only running 1 of each. Also, if you know that your opponent doesn't run D-Reacts, you could go Singing into Out for Blood, and that kind of allows you to use your resources a little bit cleaner. So yeah, that's the changes I would make with the deck. So let's talk a little bit about how to sideboard the deck, and yeah, let's get into that now. All right, guys, so let's jump into some sideboarding now. So this is how I would sideboard against Aurora and Florian. So in terms of equipment, we would be running our Null Rune Hood for AB, our Tunic because the game is going to go very long, Ironsong Verses for the extra annoyance, paired with our Jubil, and Refraction Bolters because that's the only thing that we have. So Jubil, this is going to be extremely annoying for them off of the Tunic. If we have a blue, Jubil plus CYB is great. If we don't have CYB, Jubil with an active Ironsong Versus is also very, very good. If we can get Courage tokens with Unity or with the Ironsong Versus, very, very, very likely that this connects or that they have to give us armor. Either way, we're very, very happy. And yeah, so in terms of cards that we bring in our CYBs. This is basically our Arcane Barrier, and this allows us to get out of that Flicker Risk combo range. We include all the D-Reacts because they're very efficient. This blocks the breakpoints like Snatch and, all their 0 for 4s basically. That's all you got. Allows us to block their weapon and then come back with our own weapon. And a couple extra blocky cards just to smooth things out. So running main deck is 50 cards. We're adding 17, so we're running 67 plus this equipment suite against them. All right, next up is Enigma. This is how I would sideboard against Enigma. We would bring in our Dawnblade. We bring in our Crown, our Tunic, because the game is likely to go very long. Actually, the longer the game goes, the better it is for Dory. I know that sounds very counterintuitive, but running them out of threats is a very real possibility. Because we have Chorus of Ironsong, we have Route, we can clear their board several times. We can get the game to a state where their deck is mostly no block cards, and we can kill them from there. We run our Vambrace because this is the matchup to run Vambrace in. It messes up their math, and whether or not you use that, they always have to be thinking about it. Obviously, we bring on our Bolters. So this is a configuration that I think is going to get a lot of questions. So let me explain why we picked these cards. Now, part of it has to do with what is in our sideboard. Like, we don't want Sync and Fate against them. We don't need Snag. We don't, all those cards are not very relevant. But these cards, I think, are very, very relevant. That's all you got is extra health. It's going to be online quite often. They will send 1-2 damage pings at us, and we will deal with that that's all you got, and be able to keep a full grip to attack back. Extra attack reacts always welcome against Enigma, but we're also running the CYB package against Enigma because I think that preserving your life total in this matchup is very underrated. Basically, how a typical Enigma match is going to go is they're going to make a play with Mirgai and Traverse, and you basically have to have the answer on the next turn. So typically what that involves is setting something very important into the arsenal. And once you take care of that, they're going to do that 2 more times. Obviously not with Traverse, but there's 2 more Mirror Guys that you're going to have to deal with. And, you know, once you deal with the Mirror Guys, the Wanings, the Waxings, the, you know, all of their ward, their Phantasmaclasms, their deck damage output is actually not that high. They extract a lot of their value from keeping board pieces around. So what we're trying to do is just live long enough, live through all of that, have the answers ready when they try to make a play, and keep their board clear with Singing Steelblade, Chorus of Ironsong, Route, Overpower. Take it to the very end of the game such that they have like 8 chi cards and, you know, a couple of crappy blues, and you basically just kill them with Warrior's Valor, swing, and go from there. If you can ever snowball counters with Dawnblade, you're in a very, very good position, because as soon as this comes in for 4 instead of 3, the math starts to get really messed up. Because if you have a counter on Dawnblade, what does that mean? It means they attempted to stop you last turn, but failed, which means the chance of them having a D-react in Arsenal is basically 0. So this is also where I think the extra Emboldened Blades will be very, very useful. If you can blow up an unmovable, that's obviously one of the best feelings in the world. And being able to deal with a Sinker Fate in Arsenal is also really, really good. So this is a setup I would bring into Enigma. Base 50 cards, adding 11, so 61. So yeah, that's the layout or the sideboard for Enigma. All right, guys, let's talk about Phi and Zen. So these are matchups where you were going to want to go very, very fast. You're going to want to race them down. I have tried to fatigue the ninjas. It doesn't really work that well, in my opinion. So this is the setup that I would take to play against the faster ninjas. So we're going to be bringing in Dawnblade. We're going to be bringing in our traditional Dawnblade aggro support, Crown, Grains, Braveforge Bracers, and Bolters. And we're also going to bring in our D-React package. Now, the reason we bring in our D-React package is because if they bring in a D-React package, the game is going to go a bit slower. So we're going to want to extract value with our 4 blocks and our That's All You Got. And if they did not bring in any D-Reacts, then we can smooth out our offense a little bit with these cards. And we wouldn't need 5 card hands anyways to break through if they're not playing very defensively. Additionally, we would bring in a little bit more of our attack reacts, just because they're good at racing. So yeah, playing 61 into those 2 matchups. This is a matchup which, if you're, you know, a traditional Dory player, this should feel very, very at home. You're basically trying to pick a spot to basically they commit their armor and you still get over, and then they're really, really in trouble. So that's kind of the game plan you're looking for against Zen and Phi. All right, next up is New. So we're going to be bringing in our Dawnblade against her. Instead of Grains, we're going to be running the Tunic because the game can go quite long, and that extra resource is very valuable when we want to make an offensive play. We're going to be bringing in our defensive cards. New has attack reacts. We want to be able to meet them with our Sink Fate, and That's All You Got. This card's also very, very good against the weapons, because it'll block it and return you a card at the end of the combat chain. This is the matchup where we really, really love to see Snag. This is a card that if we see it, we're going to put it into Arsenal, wait for them to try to make a play with a Bonds plus just a Nick, and shut it down real hard. Generally, we're probably going to use our armor, or we're just going to maybe block with a card and then play Snag. Adding a couple of attack reacts as well, because the game could go very, very long, so we need our threat density there. Also, in general, you don't want to take New all the way to the end game. That's where she's better at. So you basically want to try to force her to block with her power cards, or create those awkward situations when she has multiple no block cards and you're coming in with something like a Valor or Supremacy turn. So this is a matchup that I've actually had to learn a lot about, because I was playing this incorrectly, but now I'm a little bit wiser and I'm imparting my knowledge onto you guys. All right, so this is how I would sideboard against New with this post 1111 BNR deck. All right, guys, last up is Viserai. So against Viserai, we're going to be running our standard Jubiel package with Nullrune Hood, Fendel Spring Tunic, Ironsong Versus, and Refraction Bolters. So very similar to how we deal with Florian and Aurora. We annoy them with Jubiel, and we heal with CYB. However, as you can see, we don't have Fate for Seed or That's All You Got. The reason being is that we have to adapt to how fast the Viserai is playing. So if the Viserai starts to realize, hey, I might get fatigued, let me set up a little bit, let me, try to set up some Malefics, let me try to set up a 9th blade play. We need the ability to punch them in the face and just get their life to 0. And so by not running those extra D reacts, that helps our offense be smoother. Also against Viserai, we just don't need them. They don't have very many on hits. They don't play at reaction speed very often. So we just simply don't need them. We just need to deal with their rune chants in an efficient way, and that's what CYB plus Jubiel helps us do. A couple extra offensive cards just to speed up the clock if they try to play a long game. If they're trying to go, if they're a really go type of Viserai, you can play just a standard game of just blocking, healing, poking with Jubiel. That will get the job done. Their damage density in their deck is actually not that high. A lot of their damage comes from rune chants, and if you can AB them with your blues, heal some of the incidental damage as well, you're going to be in good shape. Now, this is a deck that's going to be running Reaping Blade, so you're going to need to be, a little bit careful about how you pilot the game. Try to, keep under them slightly. But yeah, shouldn't be too hard with this setup. All right, so if you guys want the full sideboard guide with every single matchup in the game, I worked really, really hard on this for Worlds. That will be available on TheCardGuyz Patreon. You'll get, the full Fabry list with the sideboard notes, the sideboard matchups, and everything is going to be there. So check that out. Yeah, I think this deck is actually in a pretty good position. It's a deck that just this existing actually helps all the Dory decks, because if your opponent hasn't scouted you, they don't know whether you're playing an aggressive Dawnblade version, you're playing a mid-range version, you're playing Decimator Axe, or you're playing this kind of 1 + 2 = 3 with 3 copies of route type of deck. So I think it helps everybody. So yeah, I think this deck is in a solid position because with Dash.io gone, I think the Runeblade concentration is going to get higher. And this is one of the most beautiful ways I've seen to deal with Runeblades. Traditionally, Runeblades have been very hard for Dorinthea. Same with Guardians, traditionally very, very difficult. Obviously, Illusionist as well. The split damage is very, very difficult to deal with, and their damage output is higher than ours. Their armor is better than ours. So this whole idea of, just running their deck out of threats, healing back, annoying them with Jubiel and Courage tokens, waiting for them to try to set up and then being able to strike back with Warrior's Valor, I think it's really, really good. Dorinthea actually can kill you much faster than you think. A lot of people are like, well, you don't snowball Dawnblade counters. Well, Warrior's Valor swing is still a lot of damage. So yeah, she has actually very good damage output when people don't block her, surprisingly. So if you're looking for a deck that will destroy Runeblades, still has some issues against Enigma, I think. but with the extra emboldened blades, extra attack reacts that might be shored up slightly. I think this is a good deck. I think this is a deck that can handle a lot of different things in the metagame. And this is a type of deck that you do need to have a plan going into it. That's why normally in these deck techs, I don't go over how to sideboard things, but I think it was very, very important to talk about how to sideboard with this deck, because you need to have a game plan for every single matchup in the game. It's really, really, really important. Okay, enough chitter chatter. If you want to find the deck list link, it is in the description below. If you want the sideboard guide, please check out our Patreon. Yep, going to be back to streaming soon as well. So if you want to check out some gameplay with this deck, I will be streaming this every Tuesday until we get some Fang, or I feel like playing Olympia or something. We'll see. All right, guys, this has been Josh Lau with TheCardGuyz. Thank you for checking out this deck tech. We'll see you guys later. Take care.